We've all watched a crime movie and wondered, could this really happen in real life? But you might be shocked to learn that some of the most haunting scenes were actually inspired by real-life horrific crimes. So today, we're going to talk about every case that was inspired by a movie. The murder case of Cassie Jo Stoddart. In 2006, in the town of Pocatello, Idaho, a horrifying murder took place. The victim was Cassie Jo Stoddart, a 16-year-old high school student who became the target of two cold-blooded killers, Brian Lee Draper and Tori Michael Adamczyk, two teenagers obsessed with horror films and the Columbine massacre. Brian Draper, born in 1990 in Utah, and Tori Adamczyk, also born in 1990 in Idaho, met by chance when they were both in 10th grade at Pocatello High School. They quickly became close friends due to their shared passion for making films and watching horror movies. They were especially fascinated by the 1996 film Scream, in which the killer wears a mask, cuts the power, and murders the victims. They also idolized Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, the perpetrators of the 1999 Columbine massacre. Brian even wrote in his journal that Harris and Klebold were heroes and that he wanted to follow in their footsteps. The two created a death list notebook, writing down the names of potential victims. At their school, there was a pretty girl named Cassie Jo Stoddart, born in 1989, who was dating her classmate Matt Beckham. Because they were a year apart in age, she didn't really know Brian and Tori and had never spoken to them. In early September 2006, Brian and Tori recorded several videos boasting that they would become the most famous serial killers in history. They bought 4 knives through a friend named Joe Lucero, and to look more like killers, they also prepared dark clothing, gloves, and white masks, painted in the style of Ghostface. On September 22nd, 2006, they learnt that Cassie would be house-sitting for relatives at Whispering Cliffs Drive, Bannock County. Before acting, they filmed a memorial video in which they said, "We're going to kill Cassie. This is not a joke." Around 6 p.m, Matt Beckham came to visit Cassie. Brian and Tori, using their status as schoolmates, started a conversation, and the group watched Kill Bill Volume 2. Cassie even gave everyone a tour of the house, including the basement. Before leaving, Brian secretly unlocked the basement door. They then left the house, parked far away to watch, and later returned, dressed in black, wearing gloves and masks, sneaking into the basement. They made noises to lure Cassie downstairs, but it didn't work. Next, they cut the power, which worried Matt. He called his mother to ask if he could stay, but was refused. Cassie decided to stay and keep watch over the house alone. When Matt left, Brian and Tori cut the power again, then charged upstairs. They attacked Cassie, stabbing her in the throat. She was stabbed about 30 times, 12 of which were fatal, mostly to her heart. She died at the scene from blood loss. Immediately after leaving, they recorded a video bragging about killing Cassie, then took their clothes, knives, and masks to Black Rock Canyon to burn and bury them. On September 24th, the homeowners returned to find Cassie dead on the living room floor and immediately called the police. At first, the police suspected Cassie's mother's boyfriend due to fingerprints found on the breaker box, but he had an alibi. Matt Beckham was also interrogated, passed a polygraph test, and had an alibi. Attention then shifted to Brian and Tori. When questioned separately, Brian first claimed they had watched Pulse at the theatre but couldn't describe the plot. After several changes to his story, Brian confessed and led police to Black Rock Canyon, where they found partially burned evidence, blood-stained clothes, knives, and masks. Tori was later arrested on September 27th. Both were charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Brian was sentenced to life in prison without parole. In June 2007, Tori received the same sentence. Although they were only 16 years old, both were tried as adults. The case of Nathaniel White. The story begins with Nathaniel White, born on July 28th, 1960, in Poughkeepsie, New York. He grew up there and graduated from Poughkeepsie High School in 1979. He then joined the US Army from 1980 to 1983, serving as a regular soldier until his discharge. In 1986, he was convicted of armed robbery, and in 1991, he attempted to kidnap a 16-year-old girl. Thanks to a plea deal, he received a lighter sentence and was released after serving 1 year. The real horror began on March 25th, 1991, when White, then 30 years old and living in Wallkill near Middletown, New York, met Juliana R. Frank, a 29-year-old woman who was 8 months pregnant with her 3rd child. Juliana was a casual acquaintance, and White lured her to a remote area near abandoned railroad tracks in Middletown. Earlier that day, he had watched the 1990 film RoboCop 2. Under the influence of the violent sci-fi action movie, White turned his dark thoughts into reality. He used a hunting knife to stab Juliana more than 40 times, targeting her abdomen and neck, and even cut the fetus from her body. The next day, her naked body was found lying on its back in a strange posed position, a disturbing imitation of a movie scene. The case was initially investigated separately by the Middletown police, but stalled due to lack of evidence. White was still arrested for the earlier kidnapping case and served a 1-year sentence. He was released in April 1992 and returned to Orange County, New York, living with his girlfriend, Jill Garrison. Only 2 months later, on June 1st, 1992, White targeted his second victim, 14-year-old Christine M. Kleber, Garrison's niece. Christine disappeared after being at White and Garrison's home. White beat and stabbed her to death, then hid her body in the woods off Echo Lake Road in Goshen. This murder was not immediately discovered. On July 10th, 1992, White attacked 34-year-old Laurette Huggins Reviere, a close friend of his girlfriend and mother of 2. Laurette was killed at her Middletown home after a violent struggle. White stabbed her in the neck and chest, sexually assaulted her, and posed her body in a provocative manner, a twisted habit he had developed from watching vampire films. This time, the investigation made some progress. Police found bloody fingerprints at the scene, and the case began to be linked to previous murders due to similarities. Detectives even attended Laurette's funeral, hoping the killer might appear. Just 10 days later, on July 20th, 1992, White reached the peak of his brutality when he killed 2 victims at once. He met 23-year-old Angelina Hopkins and her cousin, 20-year-old Brenda L. Whiteside, at the Blue Note Tavern in Poughkeepsie. The 2 women, looking for a fun night out, left the bar with White in his pickup truck. He lured them to a wooded area near Harriman Drive in Goshen, close to an abandoned farm. The 3 engaged in sexual activity, and when the women demanded money from him, White beat them both to death with a blunt object, causing severe trauma to their faces and heads. He then washed their bodies and posed them provocatively. The final murder took place just 10 days later, on July 30th. 27-year-old Adrienne M. Hunter, also looking for a night out, was lured by White to the charred remains of the Hillcrest Manor restaurant in Goshen. He stabbed her 47 times, left her body naked, and posed it in the same manner. Adrienne's body was discovered that same day, becoming the final piece in the chain of horror. By this point, White had killed 6 women in 16 months, including runaway teens, homeless women, and acquaintances, all attacked with extreme overkill. White's downfall came swiftly thanks to the victims' families. Angelina Hopkins' sister spotted him at a local bar and informed the police. Detectives tracked him, and on August 2nd, 1992, White was arrested in Poughkeepsie. Initially denying involvement, he failed a polygraph test, and when confronted with evidence such as the bloody fingerprints from Laurette's case, he confessed. He led police to the remaining crime scenes, where on August 4th, they found the bodies of Christine, Angelina, and Brenda. White described each murder in detail, blaming movies and voices in his head. He even claimed that at first he enjoyed it, but later felt remorse and wanted to be caught because he couldn't control himself. The trial took place in 1993 at Orange County Court. White was convicted of 6 counts of second-degree murder and sentenced to 150 years to life, with no possibility of parole before the year 2138. Today, at age 65, White remains incarcerated at Elmira Correctional Facility in New York. The case of John Hinckley Jr. The story begins with John Warnock Hinckley Jr., born on May 29, 1955, in Ardmore, Oklahoma, into a wealthy and stable family. His father, John W. Hinckley Sr. was the founder of Vanderbilt Energy Corporation, a major oil company, while his mother, Jo Ann Hinckley, was a homemaker. When Hinckley was 4 years old, the family moved to University Park, Dallas, Texas, an affluent residential area. During his time at Highland Park High School, Hinckley was a shy boy, often bullied and struggling to fit in. He found a new interest in playing the guitar and idolised the Beatles and Bob Dylan. After graduating in 1973, Hinckley attended Texas Tech University but dropped out in 1976, moving to Hollywood in pursuit of a music career. When that failed, he became isolated and severely depressed. In 1976, Hinckley watched Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver more than 15 times, identifying deeply with the character Travis Bickle, a lonely veteran plotting an assassination to impress a woman. Hinckley copied Bickle's clothing, mohawk hairstyle, drinking habits, and even wrote journal entries mimicking the character's lines. His obsession shifted to Jodie Foster, the young actress who played a 12-year-old prostitute in the film. Hinckley saw her as the ideal woman and believed he had to do something dramatic to win her over. He collected photos and articles about her, and starting in 1980, when Foster was studying at Yale University, he moved to New Haven to stalk her, sending dozens of love letters and making repeated phone calls. pills, all of which she rejected. By the late 1970s, Hinckley had been diagnosed with severe depression, personality disorders, and schizophrenia. He had attempted suicide multiple times and received medication, but failed to follow treatment consistently. In 1980, Hinckley briefly joined the American Nazi Party and formed his own extremist group, American Front, a group consisting only of himself. He began collecting firearms, including a Röhm RG-14 .22 caliber revolver. He studied the assassination of John F. Kennedy and developed plans for a violent act. At first, his target was President Jimmy Carter, and he even got within close range of Carter during the re-election campaign. In October 1980, he was arrested in Nashville with 3 unloaded guns, but released due to lack of evidence. After Ronald Reagan won the election in November 1980, Hinckley shifted his focus to him, believing it would be a historic act to impress Foster. On March 29, 1981, Hinckley arrived in Washington, D.C., preparing for the assassination. The next morning, he mailed his final letter to Foster, declaring his intention to kill Reagan as proof of his love. At approximately 2:27 p.m. on March 30th, 1981, as Reagan was leaving the Washington Hilton Hotel, Hinckley fired 6 shots in 3 seconds. White House Press Secretary James Brady was shot in the head, leaving him paralyzed with permanent brain damage. Police officer Thomas Delahanty was shot in the neck, and Secret Service agent Timothy McCarthy was shot in the abdomen while shielding the president. One ricocheted bullet struck Reagan in the lung, stopping about an inch from his heart. Reagan was rushed to the hospital and underwent successful surgery. Hinckley was immediately subdued and arrested. In 1982, Hinckley was tried on 13 charges, including the attempted assassination of the president. On June 21st, 1982, the court found him not guilty by reason of insanity, sparking public outrage and leading to the passage of the Insanity Defense Reform Act of 1984, which tightened restrictions on the insanity plea. The natural-born killers case. In the early 1990s, in Muskogee, Oklahoma, 2 teenagers, Sarah Edmondson, 18, and Benjamin Darras, also 18, crossed paths. Sarah came from a wealthy and influential family. Her father was a judge, and her mother was a state legislator. She had once been an excellent student and active in social causes, but had fallen into drug abuse and other addictive behaviours since the age of 16. Benjamin's life was more difficult. He lived with his mother and siblings, battled a severe addiction, and had been arrested for theft. When the two met, they quickly fell into an intense, passionate relationship. They often hung out at Sarah's family's private cabin, using drugs and watching movies. On March 5th, 1995, they decided to watch Natural Born Killers, Oliver Stone's controversial film about Mickey and Mallory Knox, a couple who go on a bloody killing spree in search of freedom, glorified by the media. The movie was filled with violence, hallucinations, and the philosophy of killing to live. Sarah and Benjamin didn't just watch it once, they replayed it multiple times throughout the night, under the heavy influence of LSD. While high, they began discussing becoming natural-born killers in real life. Initially, they planned to drive to Memphis for a Grateful Dead concert, but the idea quickly morphed into a killing spree, modelled after the movie. They brought along Sarah's grandfather's .38 caliber revolver, another gun, a small amount of cash, and a blue Nissan Maxima. On the evening of March 7th, in Hernando, Mississippi, they stopped at the Cotton Gin of William Savage, a 50-year-old businessman and father of 2. With no clear motive, Benjamin entered the office, pointed his gun, and shot Savage twice in the head. Savage died instantly. Sarah waited in the car, then joined Benjamin in taking a blood-stained cloth as a souvenir, just like in the film. They took only a small amount of cash before driving away to continue their trip. The next morning, March 8th, in Ponchatoula, Louisiana, they targeted a convenience store. Patsy Byers, 37, a mother of 2, was working alone. Sarah entered with the .38 and demanded money. When Byers offered slight resistance, Sarah shot her in the neck. Byers survived, but was left a quadriplegic, enduring years of pain until her death in 1997 from lung cancer complications related to her paralysis. Sarah and Benjamin took about $100 and a few items before driving back to Oklahoma, treating the events as part of their adventure. On March 9th, they arrived in Muskogee and bragged to friends about what they had done. One frightened friend contacted the police. On March 11th, law enforcement raided Sarah's home, seizing the revolver, the bloodstained cloth, and other evidence. Both quickly confessed, stating that the movie had inspired them. Benjamin was tried in Mississippi for the murder of William Savage and received life in prison without parole. Sarah was tried in Louisiana for the shooting of Patsy Byers and was sentenced to 35 years. Due to her cooperation with investigators and her influential family background, Sarah was granted early parole and was released in 2006 after after serving 11 years. After regaining her freedom, she married, had children, and became a public speaker on drug prevention and the influence of media. The Vampire Case. In late autumn 1994, in San Francisco, California, 25-year-old Daniel Sterling invited his girlfriend, 23-year-old Lisa Stellwagen, to see a movie. They chose Interview with the Vampire, a famous gothic film based on Anne Rice's novel starring Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt. The film revolved around eternal love, vampires, and the desire for everlasting life. After the screening on November 17th, only a few hours later, around 3:00 a.m., Stellwagen awoke to find Sterling sitting beside the bed, his gaze unusual. He whispered, "I'm going to kill you and drink your blood." At first, Stellwagen thought it was just a bizarre joke or a temporary reaction to the film. But while she was sleeping soundly again, Sterling approached her with a serrated knife. He suddenly attacked, stabbing her between 7 and 9 times in the chest and back, causing massive blood loss. He didn't stop there. Sterling slashed Stellwagen's hand and drank blood from the wound, attempting to recreate the vampire ritual from the movie as a way of granting immortality. He murmured, "If I can't have you, I'll make you immortal." Despite her severe injuries, Stellwagen remained conscious. She calmly told Sterling that if she died, he would go to prison and lose everything, making him hesitate. She seized the moment to run outside and seek help from neighbours. In a panic, Sterling called 911 but fabricated a story, claiming that a black man had attacked her. Police quickly arrived and rushed Stellwagen to the hospital, where she spent 14 days recovering. On November 19th, Sterling was arrested. He admitted to the attack, but tried to deny full criminal responsibility, blaming the influence of the movie. "I was influenced by the movie. I enjoyed the movie, but I cannot sit here and blame the movie," he said. Prosecutor Susan Briel argued that the real motive stemmed from jealousy and possessiveness, noting that Sterling had admitted to intense jealousy when Stellwagen went out with another man, making him feel out of control. The film, Briel contended, was merely an excuse to mask domestic violence. The trial stretched into 1997. The defence cited mental illness and family background as mitigating factors, but the jury concluded that Sterling was fully aware of his actions. In 1998, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The Robert Berdella Case. In Kansas City, Missouri, a man named Robert Andrew Berdella Jr. turned the house at 4315 Charlotte Street into a real-life hell. Born on January 31st, 1949, in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio, Berdella grew up in a strict Catholic family. His father worked in a factory and his mother was a homemaker. From an early age, he showed troubling signs: severe nearsightedness, being bullied for his weight, and deep emotional trauma when his father died suddenly of a heart attack when he was 16. Just 6 months later, his mother remarried, leaving him feeling betrayed and isolated. In 1967, Berdella moved to Kansas City to attend the Kansas City Art Institute, pursuing his interests in cooking and art. During that time, he was arrested for selling amphetamines to students, and in a life art class, he horrified classmates by brutally torturing animals, burying a duck up to its neck before decapitating it, and injecting dye into a chicken to observe its reaction. When the school found out, they expelled him in 1969. Afterward, Berdella worked as a chef, then in 1975 opened an oddity shop called Bob's Bizarre Bazaar. He became active in the local gay community, often befriending homeless youths and male sex workers. In 1982, Berdella purchased the 2-story home on Charlotte Street. Living alone, he saw the 1965 film The Collector, about a man who kidnaps and imprisons his victim like a butterfly, which sparked disturbing fantasies. His killing spree began on July 4th, 1984, with his first known victim, 19-year-old sex worker Jerry Howe, whom he knew through the community. Berdella lured Howe to his home under the pretense of watching fireworks, drugged his drink with sedatives, and tied him to a bed upstairs using rope and piano wire. Howe was beaten with whips, injected with chlorpromazine in the throat to paralyze him, and shocked with high-voltage electricity on his shoulders and genitals. Berdella recorded every detail in a torture log, using abbreviations like CP for chlorpromazine and EK for electric shock, while also photographing Howe in various states of agony. After 28 hours of torture, Howe died of asphyxiation when a plastic bag was taped over his mouth. Berdella dismembered the body in the basement, draining the blood and disposing of the remains in trash bags at the city landfill. 8 months later, in April 1985, his second victim was 18-year-old drifter Robert Sheldon, whom Berdella had allowed to stay at his home. Initially not planning to kill him, Berdella decided Sheldon was a burden and drugged and restrained him. The 4-day torture included injecting drain cleaner into his eyes to cause temporary blindness, driving needles under his fingernails, and deliberately causing infections. Sheldon died of suffocation, and Berdella dismembered him as well. In June 1985, 20-year-old acquaintance Mark Wallace came to Berdella's home seeking shelter from the rain. He was drugged and tortured for 2 days before dying from exhaustion and infection. That September, 19-year-old James Ferris was lured with a promise of sex, only to meet the same fate. Another victim, 21-year-old sex worker Todd Stoops, whom Berdella had known previously, was also captured, tortured and killed. The spree ended on March 29, 1988, when 22-year-old Christopher Bryson was offered sex and money to come to Berdella's house. Drugged, tied up and tortured for 4 days, Bryson managed to escape after Berdella left a box of matches nearby. While Berdella was at work, Bryson burned through his restraints, jumped naked from a second-story window and ran to a neighbour's house. His injuries, red swollen eyes and whip marks, were immediately apparent. Police arrested Berdella for sexual assault. A search of his home uncovered a horror scene: burnt ropes, a transformer for electrical shocks, syringes, veterinary drugs, over 300 Polaroid photographs of bound and injured men, detailed torture logs, a human skull in a closet, a decomposing head buried in the yard, severed vertebrae, and envelopes containing victims' teeth. Personal items belonging to missing men, including Howe and Ferris, were also found. Investigators interviewed local sex workers and used dental x-rays to identify Sheldon's skull. In interrogation, Berdella confessed to killing 6 men, naming them and describing his methods. Though he denied any link to Satanism or organ trafficking, he claimed remorse and said his acts were for physical and mental gratification. To avoid the death penalty, Berdella pled guilty in December 1988 and was sentenced to life without parole in the Missouri State Penitentiary. 4 years later, on October 8, 1992, he died of a heart attack at age 43. Alright, that's the end of today's video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching until the end.